Today's case is one of those cases that gets under your skin, because the more you'll learn, the less it makes sense. Maura Murray was just 21 years old back in 2004, born and raised in Hanson, Massachusetts. She was the fourth of 5 kids, a proper lively household, full of noise. Her dad Fred worked long hours, and her mum did what she could to keep the family steady. By all accounts, Maura grew up bright, clever, and a bit headstrong. She wasn't just good with schoolwork, she was athletic too. Cross-country, sports, keeping herself sharp. That drive and determination eventually got her into West Point, the US military academy. For a time, it looked like she'd follow a military path, the same as her father. But after 2 years, she decided it wasn't for her. She left West Point behind, transferring to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and started training to be a nurse. Nursing suited her. She liked the work, the hands-on side of it, caring for folk who needed it. Patients warmed to her, and the staff said she had a knack for it. Day to day, Maura's life looked a lot like any other uni student. Long shifts at the hospital, late nights studying, and even shifts at her part-time job working as a security guard at her campus. So yeah, really busy. She'd often go home exhausted, kettle on, phone in hand, texting her long-distance boyfriend Billy, who was still at West Point. Their relationship had its strains, mind you. The distance, the different routines, the pressures of young adulthood. But Maura was seen as someone with her life ahead of her, a young woman carving out her own path, balancing it all the best she could. Friends remembered her as loyal, funny, sometimes quiet, sometimes fiery. She had that mix of independence and vulnerability that made her both strong-willed and yet, at times, fragile. 5th of February 2004, Massachusetts winter, bitter cold, snow on the ground, that kind of heavy silence you only get up north. And on that day, something odd happened. Maura was working a late shift at her campus security job. During the night, her colleagues said she had what's been called a breakdown. She was found by her supervisor, just sat there, completely out of it, staring at a wall. When asked what was wrong, she could only say, "My sister." But later on, her sister swore she hadn't called her, hadn't said anything to upset her. And to this day, nobody really knows what triggered it and what this episode was. Then came the weekend. Maura's dad Fred came to visit. They spent time together, shopping for a new car, having tea, the usual father-daughter catch-up. On the Sunday night, Fred let Maura borrow his Toyota Corolla to head to a party. She set off, but on the way back, she lost control and crashed into a guardrail. It wasn't fatal, and no one was injured, but it did some proper damage to the car. Fred, obviously, wasn't very happy, but he told her that the insurance would sort it out. And then, a couple of days later, she made some unusual moves. On her university computer, Maura searched up directions to Burlington, Vermont, a quiet rural spot hours away. She looked up accommodation like cabins and lodges. She didn't tell her family why, and she didn't tell her friends either. It was like she had some sort of plan bubbling under the surface, but kept it tucked away. On the Monday morning, February the 9th, she emailed her professors saying there'd been a death in the family. However, there hadn't been any such death. She packed up her belongings, clothes, toiletries, her favourite textbooks, even stuffed some booze into her bag. Boxed wine and liquor. It looked less like a runaway and more like a short trip she hadn't quite explained. Monday, February the 9th, 2004. Maura leaves the campus in a black Saturn. It's not in the best condition. Cracked windscreens, a bit rusty and not very reliable. Nobody knew exactly where she was heading, but the searches on her computer suggest Vermont, maybe towards the White Mountains or even Burlington. She drives north, past the towns and motorways, the world getting quieter, roads winding deeper into snow-covered countryside. Hours tick by, and then, around 7:27 p.m, her car is spotted off Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Nose first into a snowbank, airbags deployed, no other vehicles involved. A neighbour across the road, a school bus driver, sees the crash and goes to help. He says Maura looked shaken but calm. She told him not to call the police. She said she already phoned roadside assistance, but there's no record of any call. He offered her a lift home, but she declined. She wanted to stay with the car. The man then went back inside and called the police anyway. By the time the first officer arrived at 7:46 p.m, the black Saturn was sat there, hazards off, driver's door locked, but no sign of Maura. On the back seat, they found an open box of wine. In the glove compartment, her accident forms from the crash with her dad's car just days earlier. But no purse, no phone, no bank cards, and no Maura. There's also been a bit of confusion over Maura's car. Some say she couldn't restart it after the crash because it had what's called a fuel cutoff switch, a safety feature that shuts the engine down. But her car, a 1996 Saturn SL2, never had one. Search dogs later pick up her scent, leading away from the car and tracking about 100 yards down the road, and then it stops, as if she'd stepped into another vehicle or vanished into thin air. That night, it was bitter cold, sub-zero. Police figure if she'd wandered off, she wouldn't have lasted long without shelter, but no footprints in the snow were properly noted. No sign of a struggle either, just a car in a ditch and a missing girl. That very same night, Maura's boyfriend gets a voicemail. He swears he hears something that sounds like Maura sobbing. The call was tracked back to a prepaid phone card, the kind people used before mobile contracts were common. By the early hours of February the 11th, 2004, Maura's dad, Fred, had driven the night to reach Haverhill. He was frantic, barely slept, desperate to start looking. At 8 a.m, the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, local police and volunteers fan out across the snowy back roads. Search dogs are brought in. That same evening, Maura's boyfriend arrives with his parents. He's interrogated alone, then with his mum and dad by his side. He's shaken and said he didn't know what on earth happened. But behind the scenes, the police already start framing their theory. Maybe Maura was running away. Or maybe she'd come up to the mountains to end her life. Her family didn't believe that though, for a second. To them she was stressed, but not suicidal. Not the type to vanish by choice. Fred especially refuses to believe it. He's convinced from day one that foul play is involved, that someone picked her up and took her life. At 3 p.m. the same day, police issue a bulletin and officially labelled her as possibly suicidal. However, the school bus driver who spoke to her minutes before the crash told the police that she didn't look drunk or sad or upset, just a little bit shaken. The next evening, February the 12th, Fred and Maura's boyfriend held a press conference. Cameras rolling, microphones thrust on them. They plead for information. It's the first time the public really hears about the missing nursing student from Massachusetts, last seen on a snowy back road. 10 days later, the FBI joins in. They interview relatives back in Massachusetts. Helicopters with thermal cameras sweep the forests. Cadaver dogs are worked through the snowbound trails. A pair of women's underwear is even found on a back road. Hope rises for a moment, then DNA testing crushes it, not Maura's. By early March, the family's completely exhausted. They checked out of their motel. But Fred, he didn't stop looking. Every weekend, he drove back up to Haverhill, the nearby town where she went missing, wandering the woods and trails with a torch in hand, refusing to let her be forgotten. Summer of 2004 rolls in, and months have passed since Maura vanished. Her family clinging to hope, but the search keeps throwing up more questions than answers. In July, a huge search party, nearly 100 people, combs the area around the crash site. No snow this time, so visibility was better. But unfortunately, they found nothing, and no trace of her was found. Later that year, a local man approached Fred, Maura's dad, with something chilling. A rusty knife, stained with what looked like blood. He says it belonged to his brother, who lived less than a mile from where Maura's car was found. He thinks his brother might have used it to kill her. Fred then hands it straight to the police. However, nothing conclusive ever came from it. Some say the knife was too rusty. Any DNA, far too degraded to prove anything. Others think the man who handed it in was just after a bit of reward money, spinning a tale for a bit of attention. In 2006, volunteers searched a large wooden house, barely a mile away from the crash, half abandoned, standing lonely among the trees. Cadaver dogs are taken inside, and in one room the dogs go wild, scratching at the floor, howling. A sample of the carpets cut out and sent to the lab. Everyone's on edge, convinced they're about to crack it wide open. But again, the results were never released. Whatever was pulled from that carpet either didn't show human blood, or it was so degraded and inconclusive that it couldn't be used as any solid evidence. The case keeps pulling apart characters, strange tips, rumours whispered on message boards. And in 2005, someone claims they saw a black backpack dumped at a scenic overlook miles away. Law enforcement confirm they're aware of it, but never say if they tested it, or even if it existed at all. By the late 2000s, two young women vanish in rural New England within weeks of each other. Brianna Maitland in Vermont, same age, same strange circumstances, cars abandoned. Media run with the idea of a serial predator, but police dismissed it. No evidence, they say. So what you're left with is a pile of leads, each one promising, each one fading away into nothing. A bloody knife, a creepy old house, all shadows and all dead ends. And through it all, the one thing that's clear, Maura didn't just walk off into the woods that night. Something or someone stopped her from ever coming home. Years roll on. The snow melts, the leaves turn, but Maura Murray's case never cools. In 2017, after years of silence, Maura's father finally gets access to the property of that A-frame house where the cadaver dogs went wild. Excavations were done in the basement, but once again, nothing. No Maura, no remains, nothing to explain what happened. And that's where we are today. The questions never end. Did she leave voluntarily? Did she meet foul play? Or was she caught in a twist of fate in those dark New Hampshire woods? I guess we will never know. Maura Murray, a young woman filled with life and promise, remains missing. Her story frozen in time, haunting the woods, the mountains, and the minds of everyone who ever tried to piece it together. Okay, that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed the story, and if you enjoy my videos, make sure to subscribe and drop a like. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.